Okay, let's have a look at the bass and the guitar tracks and what processing we added to let them sound the way they do. And maybe there's something useful for you. Let's dive into it. I would like to start with the guitars. There is not a lot going on the guitars. We tried to capture them in a way that they already sound pretty much like what we want to hear on the recording. Let's not forget that there is a whole chain of stuff on the mix bus that is already polishing everything that we hear. So we already have some sheen and some control and everything. So this means that we don't need as much processing on the individual tracks as we would need if there was absolutely nothing on the mix bus. So now with all that stuff that's going on the mix bus, let's see at the individual guitar tracks what they sound like without any additional individual processing. Okay, first of all, no reverb. I hardly ever use any reverb on this kind of music, on this kind of guitars. I want them to be as crisp and grippy and clean as possible. And when you start adding delays and reverbs and stuff, it's getting washy and washy. Also, we only have 2 guitars, no quad tracking, no extras, and it's a basic riff, and the less stuff you have going on, the more chance you have to get it really grippy. At least that's my take on it, and I think it worked pretty well here. If we need more like dimension to the guitars and everything, let's not forget that there is still the bass. The bass, for me, is a big part of the guitars. That's why we are also looking at them in combination today, because the bass is not just like the low octave below the guitars and doing its own stuff. For me, it is a part of the guitars. It's going well into the range of the guitars and making the guitars just sound bigger. So first of all, there is no need for the guitars to sound huge, huge, huge. We always have to check this in context. Sometimes you would be surprised how little the guitars sound individually, although you think, oh, they are huge, but it's a matter of context. I also don't record the guitars very, very close to the speaker. I want to go at a pretty distance so that we don't get this proximity effect and rumble low end build up that we then all have to cut out in order to get crisp and clean guitars. So let's see what we have done to this recording to enhance a little bit. We have some EQ going on. Let me see. This is on the left guitar. This is on the right guitar. It's pretty much the same thing. So let's focus on one EQ. So no dramatic change, just a little bit more beef down here. Removing a little bit of this boxiness in the lower mids. And adding the tiniest amount of attack on the higher side. Let's have a look at the other guitar. I also put it into the center. It's basically the same thing. I just wanted them to be a little bit thicker and have a little bit more bite up there. And that's pretty much it. Those 2 limiters that we have here, let's see what they do. Maybe they are shaving off the guitars a little bit to just control, especially this low end thing. Let us see what they do. I put them up both side by side. So left guitar, right guitar. I put them in. As you maybe can hear, they only really control and level a little bit the low end, especially when those palm mutes are playing. There you always tend to get a little bass build up or low mid build up, And this is, to me, a nice way to control this. You could also use a multi-band compressor that is only reacting to the lows, but I find this is really quick and easy solution. Just shave off a couple dB with a limiter like the L2 and you're good to go. There is not much more going on the guitars than this. We didn't use any EQ or compression on the way in. Marc delivered a really good performance, tried to be very consistent with his playing so that there are no big jumps in volume, and you don't need a lot of compression on electric guitars. They are compressed as hell by default anyway. So if you're going into an amp and you are distorting it, it is already compressed. There is next to no dynamic anyway. So the only thing is on these low palm mute parts where you have a little build-up. But except from this, I don't think that you need a lot of compression on this kind of rhythm guitars. Okay, now let's go to the bass and see what this sounds like. First, solo, completely dry without any processing. And then we add plugin after plugin and see what they do. And then we have a look at how they work in combination with the guitars. Okay, completely dry and naked. Okay, Marc played the bass with fingers and tried to play it with a lot of attitude. So with impact and we have not such a mellow sound, but we have a lot of clong and clang going on the bass, just to have more aggressive attitude and give it some energy. Okay, the first plugin we have is a Saturn by FabFilter. This is a saturation plugin and we wanted some distortion on the bass, and that's exactly what we did. That's sounding really nice. I used the setting, heavy saturation, and just left the low octave alone. To my ear, it sounds better if we don't distort the very low frequencies, but start a little bit higher. Here we started around 60 hertz, so the very low deep string notes, they are not distorted, but we just distort from the lower mid-range up to the very top. Okay, next up we have Soothe. We use this as a kind of low-end compressor to control the very low region. So we had a C sharp drop tuning, so pretty low, and I didn't want the bass to mess up the low end and mess with the kick drum. So just a little bit of dynamic EQing or the kind of multi-band compressing in the very low register just to clean it up and control it a little bit. Let's see what it does. It's not a lot, 1 or 2 dB of control. Just if some notes get a little bit too boomy down there, they are just controlled a tiny little bit. Next is, an emulation of a Pultec EQ. What I wanted to do is boost low end. I wanted more fatness out of the bass. Marc played in this pretty percussive way, which gives you a nice mid-range, but you have to make sure that you get enough low end out of the instrument. And Pultec EQ style EQs work pretty well because you can counterintuitively boost and cut the same frequency at the same time. But what it actually does is, let's say in this case we boosted 30 hertz, so very low, but it's a broad boost. It's not like a spiky boost, it's a broad boost. So we boost the very low end, but if you only boost and don't clean up afterwards, everything gets boomy and you get too much low mid-range as well. If you attenuate this frequency while boosting in this kind of EQ, it's just cleaning up everything around this center of the frequency that you're boosting. So we're boosting 30, and while attenuating, it's not attenuating 30 Hertz, but around this. This is like the Pultec trick, or what this kind of EQ does. Let me engage it and disengage it so you can hear what it does. We are getting more meat. I just got an idea, maybe I can show you with, here we have this signal generator. I'm going to put some pink noise on it. We don't listen actually to it, but let me put in an analyzer. I just use FabFilter now as an analyzer. And what we are going to do is we have a look at this frequency response from pink noise. So now we are adding in a Pultec style EQ. Just a second. Pultec. Here it is. Now see what happens. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to 30 Hertz and I'm going to boost that region. Without? With? So you can see it's boosting around 30 Hertz, but it's going way up here until 200 or 300. And now watch what happens if I attenuate the same frequency. It's not going to attenuate a lot around 30 Hertz, but it's going to clean up the surroundings of this frequency. Look at this. You can see how this gets dipped down. Now if I bypass the plugin, we can see that this region is more or less where it was before, but we only have the good clean boost around here. Now, of course, you could argue, why don't you just take an EQ that's just boosting in a bell shape around that region? I don't know, this plugin just sounds great. It's also adding maybe some harmonic or something that is really pleasing to the ear, or just the shape of the curve just naturally works fine on this kind of instrument. It also works fine on bass drum, and it just works without having to fiddle around with shapes of EQ curves, so why not just use it? But this is basically what this Pultec trick is, boosting and cutting the same frequency at the same time, which is, yeah, actually boosting and cleaning the surroundings of that frequency. Okie dokie, now let's go back to our bass track. Next up we have a little surgical EQ to remove a couple of aspects of the sound that we didn't like. Especially there was some distortion artifacts or like results of the distortion that was a little bit too much. Marc played very percussively and the distortion was adding some click noises that I didn't really like. Let me show you exactly what I mean. And then removing the very, very high end, because we don't really need all that fizz up there. And yeah, this low cut is more like a safety net so that we don't have too much down there, and just also pulling down a little bit like the Pultec attenuation did, a little bit around 200 Hertz. So I wanted solid low end around 50, 60 something Hertz, and just clean out a little bit more around this, and then removing this honky clonky finger thing. And that is pretty much it. The final stage is a limiter. I suspect that this is limiting heavily, and a little bit like with the guitars, while limiting, also controlling the boominess of the bass a bit, and of course adding some volume. So I'm not afraid to really shave off some of the bass to get it as consistent as possible. You most of the time will really enjoy having a very consistent level on the bass, so that it's like powerful all the time and jumping around. There are different ways to achieve this. Using the Saturn saturation already did quite a bit of this, because saturation is always also some kind of compression and adding density to a signal and removing some of its spikiness and its dynamic. But yeah, in the end, you can use a compressor or a limiter, whatever fits. In this case, I just used this limiter and I liked what it was doing. Now let's listen to the bass together with the two guitars only for a second. And then I cut out the bass, and then you can see that while before the guitars and all these things sounded big, if I remove the bass, it also lets the guitars sound a little bit smaller. So it's not just bass, but the bass is a part of the string instrument group as I would like to see it. Yeah, so in optimal way, the bass is not just doing its own thing, but is just a part of a team of instruments. The same goes with the bass and the drums. The bass, of course, is in concurrence with the attacks of the bass drum. So you just have to make sure that all work nicely together, that the balance is right, that every instrument has its own spot, and don't focus too much on soloing those instruments and just pumping it up extremely, just only to find out that in the team of instruments it's not working that well anymore. This is all a big team play, and everyone has to find its spot and just serving the exact purpose that it's supposed to serve. Yeah, that was the whole treatment for our stringed instruments, and I hope there was something of value for you that you could apply for your next mix. See you in the next episode for vocals.